Ready to start? Can I do a little bit? I'm starting. Yes. Can I just look that? We are presenting 8 by 8 WI on women doctors to our director. Becoming national president of our organization. And Bhatla in WI is presenting to me. Nalini, I wanted this to be kept in your library. Yes. Yes. Who was she ready to start? Okay.
Namaskar, a very good afternoon. I, Dr. Beena Joshi, on behalf of Professor P.K. Devi Oration Committee, extend a warm welcome to one and all who are gathered here and those who have joined us online via YouTube. This is 31st oration of Professor P.K. Devi, arranged jointly by ICMR's National Institute for Research in Reproductive and Child Health and Kasturba Health Society Medical Research Center. An oration in memory of a legendary figure, Professor P.K. Devi, being organized for more than 30 years, speaks volumes of her contribution in shaping our institute's foundation and career of many scientists who are very closely associated with her. I'm sure you will all agree that our institute has been blessed, that we had visionaries like Dr. Shanta Rao and Professor P.K. Devi, and all directors and scientists who have strived hard to keep the light shining. This Oration Award was first started at Kasturba Health Society by respected Dr. Ashok Vaidya sir and Dr. Rama Vaidya madam in 1992. We took over in 2018, and in 2019, the centenary year of Professor P.K. Devi was celebrated at PGI Chandigarh, where Professor Devi had spent most of her career. Eminent scientists, academicians, and public health professionals, including few Nobel laureates, have been recipients of this prestigious Oration Award. After a span of nearly 2 years of COVID pandemic, we are holding this oration ceremony in a hybrid mode, and I'm delighted to see many alumni, my senior colleagues, coming in person to attend this function. I welcome Dr. Usha Saraya madam, who has kindly consented to be the chief guest for today's function, along with her colleagues from Association of Medical Women in India, and also my colleague from Kasturba Health Society. The orator for today, Dr. Neerja Bhatla, has joined us online from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Welcome to you, ma'am. Along with our colleague from ICMR headquarters, Dr. Ravleen Bakshi, Scientist C, Division of Reproductive Biology, Maternal and Child Health. Dr. Smita Mahale, our previous director, has also joined us online. Welcome, ma'am. Professor Devi's son, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, and some of his family members and her close associates have also joined us on YouTube via e-link. I now call upon stage our director, Madam Dr. Geetanjali Sachdeva, Dr. Usha Saraya, chief guest of today's function, Dr. Xxxi Joshi, honorary consultant and emeritus professor, Kasturba Health Society, and Shubhada Agashe from Kasturba Health Society to come on the dais. I request you all to come ahead to light the lamp and invoke the blessings of the Almighty. Thank you. I request all the dignitaries to take their seat. I request Dr. Geetanjali Sachdeva to formally welcome our chief guest for today's function, Dr. Usha Saraya, with a floral bouquet.
यहाँ से
Dr. Navleen Bakshi, who is there on our behalf from ICMR headquarters at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. I request her to kindly welcome Dr. Neerja Bhatla, orator for today, with a floral bouquet on our behalf. Can we see you, Navleen? Yes. Welcome, madam. Thank you. I now request Dr. Geetanjali Sachdeva to give a welcome address. Very good afternoon. On behalf of the Institute and Kasturba Health Society Medical Research Center, I welcome you all who are joining online and offline for the 31st Professor P.K. Devi Oration Memorial Award ceremony. And it's really a pleasure to see so many of our ex-colleagues with us today. And it's really a pleasure to see all of you, in fact. And I would also like to thank Chief Guest, Dr. Usha Saraya ma'am, who joined us for this event. Ma'am has been associated with us for so many years and has contributed significantly to the growth of our institute. So thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and joining us today. And finally, I would like to welcome, and I would ask all of you to put your hands together to welcome the star of today's evening, Professor Dr. Neerja Bhatla, to the recipient of the Cervical Xxxi Award. I think many of you know about Dr. Bhatla, her contribution. But those who are young and unversed, you will hear more about her accolades in a short while. And I would just say that when her name was proposed, there was unanimous and very enthusiastic yes from all the members of the selection committee. So I would say, Dr. Bhatla, you made our job very easy. And easy, you have made the lives of many, many million women who are born and would be born because of your relentless work in the past 3 decades. She has been striving hard to curb the spread of cervical cancer in India, and her efforts are really important in the sense considering the enormity of this problem, cervical cancer in India. You know that this is the second most common cancer in Indian women. Almost, I think, approximately 120,000 cases are reported every year. More than 70,000 cases, women die because of cervical cancer. It means After every 8 minutes, one woman died because of cervical cancer. So, madam, your efforts are really, really important. And her thoughts or her efforts in creating awareness among women about cervical cancer, her focus on vaccination for young girls, as well as her many efforts in creating indigenous HPV based tests. And also, I would say context specific screening program, be it DIA or be it HPV DNA based test. I'm sure your all efforts will be really like stepping stone for India to meet WHO criteria for 2030, like that triple pillar implementation strategy, 90, 70, 90. So thank you, Dr. Bhatla, for your great efforts. And I'm sure these efforts would pay in the long run. Thank you, Dr. Bhatla. And at an institute level, we are also trying to address this issue of cervical cancer. Like in the past, we were trying to understand the genetic basis of cervical cancer. We have done some studies where we have looked at the role of HLA and also cytokine genes for their association with cervical cancer. And in recent years, we have extended our screening program to rural and tribal community, and our data so far shows that approximately 5 to 6% of screened women are HPV positive. We are also making efforts to see that these screen positive women are followed up. And Dr. Anushri Patil has undertaken one study where she's trying to understand what could be the challenges in the implementation of screening programs. So this is from our end what we are trying to address this cervical cancer issue through research. But we are very, very confident, like with the now rollout of this new Cervavac vaccine, indigenously developed cervical cancer vaccine, and people who are so passionate, like Dr. Bhatla and Dr. Usha Saraiya ma'am. With such kind of passionate researcher at the helm, I'm sure we would be able to curb the menace of this cervical cancer. So with this, I would hand over to Ragini for introducing our chief guest. So thank you all for joining us, and I wish you a great afternoon today. Thank you, Dr. Geetanjali. I now invite my colleague, Dr. Ragini, who is a public health expert, scientist in the Department of Operational Research, to welcome and introduce Dr. Usha Saraiya. Dr. Ragini, as we all know, is a nodal officer of Model Rural Health Research Unit and has been conducting a lot of studies in tribal areas and has several publications in the area of maternal and child health.
Thank you, Dr. Bina. Good afternoon, all. It is my proud privilege to introduce Dr. Usha Saraiya, ma'am. In fact, Dr. Usha Saraiya doesn't need any introduction. So, Madam is consultant obstetrician gynecologist at Bridge Candy, Sethi, and Elizabeth Hospital, Mumbai. She has received award for outstanding woman obstetrician and gynecologist at PIGO 2003. She is chairman Indian College of Obstetrician and Gynecologist 2006 to 2009. She has been conferred honorary fellowship by RCOG in 2012. She is the past president of MOGS and FOSSI. She has received very remarkable contribution, that is Lifetime Achievement Award by AOGIF India in September 2017. She has received John Hossan Oration delivered at Cuttack in March 2018. And a very important again contribution, delegate to WHO's 71st Assembly for Discussion on Women's Health at Geneva in May 2018. Again, one more achievement, Lifetime Achievement Award by FOSSI in January 2020. Then, very recent achievement for Madam, International Federation of Cervical Pathology and Colposcopy has conferred Living Legend at the World Congress held in Delhi in July 2021. The next part which I would like to highlight is that I was very fortunate enough to work with Madam when I was member secretary of NIIMS Ethics Committee for Clinical Studies from 2013 to 18. So Madam has been associated as chairman of our committee, NIIMS Ethics Committee for Clinical Studies from 2011 to 2018. And I've learned a lot from Madam. And during her tenure as chairman, I would just like to mention that Our institute received the prestigious Xxxi Prof recognition in November 2014 in Philippines, wherein we had gone to Philippines. I was with Madam to receive this prestigious trophy from the organizers in the International Percap Xxxi Conference, which was there in Philippines. So I welcome you, ma'am, for the answers. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ragini. Over to you, ma'am. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Rajini, for those kind words. I also thoroughly enjoyed my extended tenure as chairman of the ethics committee, and both of us used to work very hard on all the papers submitted, the schemes submitted for research. And I'm very happy because, I started my career with ICMR as a research officer, and I never really left that institute. I've come back in so many capacities in different departments and different projects, and I've enjoyed all of them thoroughly. It has made me conscious of the value of science and research. And to this day, I think that's a very, very valuable asset to have, is to have an access to an institute which does research and scientific. Can I have my first slide, please? So from life, most beings pass into death, but some beings pass from life to legend. And these legendary beings continue to live in the hearts of fellow beings. Moreover, they continue to serve society and science. Today, we pay a tribute to one such legendary figure, Dr. P.K. Devi. She was an excellent clinician. She was a keen researcher, and she was a very valuable scientist. All these attributes many people have, and many people are excelling at it. But in addition to that, she was an able administrator. Not many people can do that. And beyond that, she was a builder of institutions and organizations. And that very few people are able to do. So for all of you young scientists who are in the audience today, I want this lecture and this program to be inspirational and motivational. And you decide for yourself what all you can do with your life and with the help of the institute, which is the platform. It gives you the platform to perform and to do the best that you can for science and technology. And through these 30 memorial orations we have had, Dr. P.K. Devi's scientific thought has continued to inspire us, and so the scientist in her remains alive and immortal. She passed away in 86 at a relatively young age of 68. She could have maybe perhaps contributed much more. But why are some persons considered to be immortal? You question yourself. Because although none of us are going to meet Dr. P.K. Devi or hear her speak, it is through these brilliant orations delivered in her memory that her words, actions, thoughts live on, though she is not with us herself. Medical science is so vast and constantly moving forward. And how does this happen, this movement? This movement happens through research and is brought about by people who live and work in research institutes. And that is what all of you are doing today. And I must respect that work and I must applaud that work. And we would like to pay a tribute to all of you who are involved with scientific research. Because eventually we want to serve humanity, eventually we want to give the best of medical care to our patients. But what is in the realm of research today will translate into clinical practice tomorrow. So research has far-reaching impact on humanity. What research you do in your labs, you might wonder, what use is this? When is this going to be of use? But very, very soon, it will help some problem to be solved in clinical practice and someone will benefit from the research. So research workers and research institutes are also the wealth of our nation. Many things are wealth of our nation. We say women's health is wealth of our nation. And every child is a wealth of our nations. To that you can add our research workers and our research institutes. So today I'm happy to welcome Dr. Neerja Bhatla, the 31st orator in the series who has devoted her life to preventable but not yet prevented the reality of cervical cancer. At the end of her lectures, you will realize what is primary prevention and how close we are to that. And then you will rewrite this line and say preventable and soon to be prevented. It is we are that close. And this is a historic moment, I tell you why. Because about 50 years ago, in this very institute, we were told that WHO has declared cervical cancer to be a preventable disease. And they classified it as preventable disease. So all of us who were working in the field, we said, how can that happen? How can you say it's to be prevented? Has anybody prevented it? And we don't even know the cause. How will we ever prevent such a thing? So at that time, we had a meeting in your ground floor seminar hall with the Association of American Women in India and the Institute. We had pathologists, we had clinicians, we had lab personnel, we had research workers, and we had a whole group. And I moderated that discussion. And we asked each one the question. And then we realized at the end of it that what WHO means is that invasive cervical cancer can be prevented by early diagnosis of precancerous lesions. And the idea was that we must diagnose in every single woman a precancerous lesion during the phase that it is precancerous and not allow it to And then what did we have at that time? We had only one test, and that was the pap smear test. It was a low cost, no technology test, which we said we can take all over the world and save women. And most of us at that time were not quite sure if it's ever going to happen. But with research and scientific data and persistent scientific interest, it did happen. We have a multitude of tests. The origin of cervical cancer was organized, discovered, researched, and proved. And we got the vaccines ready, and we started using the vaccines at the dawn of the second century. They were imported, they were expensive, not possible for every woman in India to get. And we were wondering, what can we do about this? And then we got our own vaccine, maybe thanks to the COVID, sort of sponsorship of vaccines, we came to this stage. So today, in 50 odd years, I am there and you are there, and this institute, in the same institute, we have a proof that we can make it prevented and soon. So we will hear Dr. Bhatla give us the plan of how it is going to be rolled out. So I wish to thank ICMR, National Institute for Research in Reproductive and Child Health. I'm so happy that you have included child health because, as I told you, children are the wealth of our nations. And it is sad to hear that our uh, babies, when they are born, after we deliver them with so much effort, in the first 5 years, they may not even survive. So it's very important to have child health with us. And also the Kasturba Health Society, I know it's very active. They've done a lot of research. Xxxi Joshi is somebody who started her career with us and has come here and done PhD and done remarkable work. There are many people who are my students and everyone who's come here to do their PhDs, they come back to us. There is a lot of interaction, and I'm happy that all of you are working so hard to promote this science and research. It's a very powerful tool in your hands, and you are going to have an impact on humanity. Have faith in yourselves, have faith in your abilities, and have faith in your knowledge that you're going to contribute immensely to humanity in the coming years. Thank you all, and I must make a special thanks of Dr. Joshi, Ragini, Anushri, with whom I worked so closely in the last few years, and they're all doing marvelous work. And I look forward to seeing how well they develop and reach the pinnacle of their careers. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
I'm coming there. Thank you, Dr. Usha Saraya, for putting forth your thoughts so beautifully. You have lauded Professor Devi's contributions, acknowledged the orations that have been happening for more than 30 years, and also emphasizing the importance of research and how eventually it helps mankind, and boosting our morale to continue with our efforts. Although at times we are all disheartened that it is not showing the way we want it to look like. But yes, someday we'll see the light of the day. Thank you once again. We now move ahead. I invite Dr. Rama Vaidya, who is unfortunately not able to join us in person today. She is our mentor and research collaborator, a renowned gynecologist and reproductive endocrinologist associated with Kasturba Health Society Medical Research Center, and currently holds the position of Secretary Research Advisory Committee at the organization. Her research interests are in the area of PCOS, reverse pharmacology, and Indian systems of medicine, to name a few. She has several publications and has authored several chapters and books. And she, along with Dr. Ashok Vaidya sir, have formed a consortium of like-minded institutes in Mumbai, including our institute, to address various aspects of PCOS, and we call our consortium Abhiyan PCOS. Her team, along with Dr. Anushri Patel at our institute, is developing national guidelines for diagnosis and management of PCOS. She has always been in awe of Professor P.K. Devi's clinical, research, and administrative conduct during her association with her at this institute. I now invite Dr. Rama Vaidya to talk and share about Dr. P.K. Devi and her association with Dr. P.K. Devi. Over to you, ma'am. Dr. Rama Vaidya, you need to unmute.
Okay, am I heard now? Can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Madam.
Yeah, if you are hearing me, somebody will share my slides, please. Also, yeah, Bina. Yeah, once you are sure of that, then I will start. Meanwhile, I'm able to see many people in the audience.
Can you
And,
be loud? We can't hear you.
huh?
Can you be a little loud?
Is it better now?
Yes.
Better.
Is it better? Is it better? Bina?
Yes. Yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes. Yes.
fine. Then, uh, Dr. Good afternoon, Dr. Saraya, Dr. Neerja, Bhaskar Bhai, Dr. Gitanjali, Dr. Bina Joshi, and other friends, and Dr. Jayshree Joshi and Subhada. My thoughts really go when I have been given this topic of Professor P.K. Devi, a legend. My thoughts go back to the very first, and that can be seen in the next slide. Next slide, please. Somebody is sharing my slides. Yeah. So my thoughts go back to the first Professor P.K. Devi Memorial Oration, which was held in September 1992 at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan Chowpatty, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Usha Saraya, Dr. Usha Krishna, and others were present. Professor Sunay Bergstrom, a Nobel Prize winner of 1982 for isolation, identification, and analysis of prostaglandins, he was the one who had delivered that first oration. And this was convened by Dr. Ashok Vaidya and Dr. K.S. Raghavan, who were very close to Professor P.K. Devi. And Professor P.K. Devi was an architect of the clinical application of prostaglandins in women's reproductive health. So my thoughts have gone back to the first oration, and I'm very glad that Dr. Saraya and Dr. Bina Joshi did make a mention of the continued efforts from the time of 1992 that we've been able to hold annual orations. Next slide, please. So Professor Bergstrom does share with us in that proceedings, and I will be quoting him very often. But this was from his speech at the Nobel Prize winning uh, function, where he gives importance to collaborative endeavor in research in the field of discovery science. And he says, in our research work, we have through the years collaborated with many hundreds of scientists and technicians in many countries. We feel little more comfortable if we are considered as representatives of these large groups of able and dedicated people working in these fields. And he emphasizes that it's more important that science does not know any national boundaries. And I always feel many boundaries can be bridged within our country, outside our country. He also shares there his story about his student days when he was working on heparin. When he was working on heparin, somebody else was working on heparin, that was Weisblatt, in Columbus, USA. And they continuously continued their exchanging thoughts on science. It was in Upjohn where Weisblatt became head of the chemistry and ultimately research director that they continued to work, both Professor Bergstrom, Dr. Devi, and Weisblatt. And as can be seen in the next slide, please. What had happened was, this was to come, uh, I think you jumped one slide. I have a feeling you've jumped one slide. Yes, yes. So architects of bench to bedside clinical medicine and translational impact for women's reproductive health care. How did that happen? There was a special program for research and training in human reproduction under the umbrella of WHO. And Professor Bergstrom was the chairman of that prostaglandin task force. There were many task forces under this HRP, and prostaglandin task force was one of the task forces. In that, he was chairman, and Professor Devi was a very active member of that PTF, where they were to use and do trials on cargo post. A pharma industry adjourned to took up the responsibility of development of the first prostaglandin drug and donated to this HRP WHO. 3,000 patients use 15 methyl compound of carbopost. My slides are gone. Can I get it back, please? And what is very important that, and I think probably it is there on the next slide, but I would like to complete if you can give me this slide also. All right, doesn't matter. So translational research really involving the combined talents and knowledge of clinical and preclinical research, very important preclinical research, offers the hope of achieving greater success in clinical trials through the development of preliminary efficacy data or proof of principle on a compound prior to testing in a full-scale clinical trial. And Professor Devi did it. How did she do? One evening she was studying why not to use prostaglandins in normal delivery to decrease the blood loss. And what she found that by using a smallest dose of carbos injection at the third stage of the delivery of the anterior shoulder, not only the duration of the labor was curtailed, but the amount of blood loss. And she says that it decreased from 260 ml to less than 60 ml. And so that was it. And this has been shared by Dr. Burston in the first oration that he gave. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, translational research is a connection between clinical outcomes and healthcare policy. Professor Devi galvanized research and healthcare and influenced the health policy. Healthcare is a continuum from advancements in basic sciences, patient applications, clinical outcomes, efficacy analysis, and policy. The ultimate goal of many tools is to improve patient care, clinical evidence, and efficacy should maximize limited resources. Very important that through that evidence and efficacy, you may be able to apply, and ultimately it comes to the economic burden, and so it could be that it can maximize limited resources. We in ICMR are great deal to late Professor Devi for her vision, not only guiding the council, but also the nation for strengthening the Safe Madhuri program at national level. This was in the first Professor Devi Oration proceedings, where Dr. Saxena, then Senior Deputy Director General of ICMR, and Dr. Tripathi, DG ICMR heads, talked about Professor Devi. Next slide, please. So now when we were thinking of that, what that impact has been now, how is it relevant today? And today Professor Dr. Usha Saraya did make a mention that beyond their life, the relevance is, it multiplies. And that is what has happened. Dr. Sheila Mane, when I called the president of Indian Menopause Society, current president, that give me one name that has dedicated herself to the cause of preventing PPH, efficiently treating PPH, and that is Dr. Sheila Mane. And when I asked her, and she said, oh, it's a boon. The prostaglandins is also still in use. It has its own place beside other nutrotonics, and PPH stopped every drop. As Vice President of Foxy South Zone 2014, Dr. Sheila spread the message about preventing PPH in every nook and corner of the country. She has conducted 23 PPH workshops during 1 year, and she had prepared a kit through the Bangalore Society of OBGYN and introduced it to the Foxy as well as to FIGO. It was acknowledged by Dr. Andre from Canada and others from FIGO president at MGM Mumbai. Next slide, please. So with my curiosity, I wanted to ask, is there any current guidelines for the use of PGs in women's reproductive health care, including the management of PPH in India today? And it was very nice that these outstanding obstetricians had many things to share with me. Today is not the platform for me to talk on PPH. The relevance is that how beyond her life, what she had galvanized has continued, and Dr. Tak had told me that also Dr. Geeta Balsekar, both of them, they said that it's a boon. The postgraduate work that was laid down by Dr. Devi has been boon. And today, even as a very important component of management of PPH, prostaglandins exist. Next slide. Then I went to Dr. Bhaskar, who's here. Thanks a lot, Dr. Bhaskar. Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, son of Professor Devi, because Professor Devi had an excellent administration. Guru's Guru, Guru Nam Guru, and a great research scientist also. But beyond that, she was a family person. And not only family person within her own family of 3 children, Dr. Bhaskar, Dr. Prasanna, and Dr. Lakshmi Mehta. Dr. Lakshmi Mehta, who also gave a 25th Professor P.K. Devi Oration. And these pictures are very valuable to me. And thank you very much, Dr. Bhaskar, for sharing it with me. Dr. Balakrishnan, Professor Balakrishnan, husband of Professor Devi, was in Indian Army Medical Corps Emergency Ward Commission as a parachutist. And what had happened was, at that time, his surgical skills were at really use for those who were at war and wounded. But then he took fascination for plastic surgery and trained himself as a plastic surgeon and became the father of plastic surgery in modern India, the guru of gurus. And this has been very nicely captured in an article in Indian Journal of Plastic Surgery 2018 by Dr. Sharma Ajge. Also, what you see here is 25th Professor P.K. Devi Oration given by Dr. Lakshmi, where you see Dr. Dr. K.S. Raghavan here, Dr. Ashok Vaidya, Dr. Smita Male, and the family of Professor Devi, and also I must make a mention of Shobna, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan's wife, and Dr. Salla Gopalan. They were all here. And the other picture that you see is Dr. Harold Gillis, who is been considered as a father of plastic surgery in the world. And he had visited Nagpur, where he had stayed with the family, and that's the picture. The next slide, please. So Professor Devi listened to a distant drum, and she stepped to the inner whisper. If I really feel very fascinated by her personality, or this is something different, out of the box thinking and listening to inner whisper, not getting distracted by outside world. Though she was a great administrator and great communicator, she had a special space where she did listen to the distant drum. Professor Ranjit Rochaudhary, when in eulogy for Professor Devi was writing in that first oration, the souvenir, said her patient was Sitra. And I wish that someone would write about this aspect. While he was writing, his thoughts were being captured in a poem. You can see a picture of late Mrs. Nandini Ben Mehta, wife of Dhirubhai Mehta. Dhirubhai, president of Kasturba Health Society, who looks after 2 very important institutes, NGIMS and Kasturba Health Society Medical Research Center, where we all work. Dr. Deshi Joshi, myself, Dr. Shubhavdi P is a research director there, has been founded by Dr. Ashok Vaidya and Vaidya Antarkaji, and I owe a lot to all of them. Now I'm coming back to Nandini Ben Mehta. When she wanted to write, I said, Nandini Ben, you are a great poetess. Why don't you create a poem about Professor Devi? And she said to me, but how do I know what is it? And I shared so many stories about her that I had listened to from her own students like Dr. Deshi Joshi, Dr. Vyal Joshi, Dr. Salla Gopalan and others, and of course Dr. Raghavan. And then when I said that, she wrote, "Maa ko bhi jiski god mili." The mother whose lap became shelter for mothers, that's what, and she captured in 3 stanzas. I will not have time. If anybody wants, I would definitely share this because it's an excellent poem. One who has articulated these tears, tears of those mothers who were young women raped and then they had become mother. And there were not at that time MTPs that galore. They would have undergone the criminal uh, termination of labor or the pregnancy. So she had specially created a ward for them and also looked after those children for adoption. And in this very souvenir, we have an article by my sister who was a great social scientist and had worked for International Adoption Institute. So one who has articulated these tears and searched her life's pearls in these tears, let us prostrate to that Devi, blessed be her name, the mother whose lap became shelter for mothers, let us prostrate. This poem has been shared by Xxxi President late Dr. Tank, who was very fond of this, and he had kind of shared with Xxxi presidents over a period of many, many years. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. My acknowledgements. I'm very thankful to Dr. Gitanjali, Director ICMR NIR at CH, and Dr. Shabaudipi, Director Kasturba Society Medical Research Center, Dr. Ashok Vaidya, Professor Emeritus at Kasturba Society Medical Research Center, and Dr. Deshi Joshi, again, Professor Emeritus with us, who is really soul and heart, and one of the members of the committee members of annual P.K. Devi Memorial Oration. This is the time when we handed over at the time of the 25th oration. You can see here Dr. Smita Male, Dr. Vaidya, Veena is there, Subhada, Agashe, Jason Joshi Madam, and Anushri. And Dr. Jason Joshi has established and supported cervical cancer screening, research, and treatment of cervical precancerous conditions and RTIs in 3 centers through voluntary services and research projects. She has continued pre-screening of thousands of women for cervical cancer to provide affordable pap smear screening and colposcopy for the underprivileged to detect and to prevent the cancer. And though it can be prevented, and it has not been prevented, this is what I'm looking forward to listen to Professor Dr. Neerja Bhatla. I'm so glad that it is the right choice, as was mentioned both by Dr. Ragini as well as by Dr. Gitanjali and later on by Dr. Usha Saraya. I look forward to this and thank you very much and thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk to you people about how she was legendary, Professor P.K. Devi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rama Vaidya, for sharing your thoughts about Professor Devi on this occasion. I must say, every year I hear different dimensions about Professor Devi from you. I think you have so much more to share. Uh, so we hear only once in a year, but I think you have done great justice to this event today. Thank you once again.
Thank
I
you.
now invite Dr. Anushri Patil, my colleague, to introduce Professor Bhatla, who is the orator for today's event. Dr. Anushri Patil is the gynecologist and scientist and heading the division of clinical research at the Institute. She is in charge of the multidisciplinary PCOS clinic at the Institute. She also has a research program in the tribal areas of Dahanu, Pioneer district on cervical cancer screening. It's an implementation research that she has been doing and has been contributing to the area in collaboration with Tata Memorial Hospital. Over to you, Dr. Anushri.
Thank you, Dr. Veena. A very good afternoon to all our respected dignitaries on and off the dais, all the invitees for the oration, dear colleagues and friends. It is indeed an honor for us to have the esteemed presence of Dr. Neerja Bhatla to deliver this prestigious Dr. P.K. Devi oration. Dr. Bhatla needs no introduction to this august gathering, but I consider this a privilege to do my humble duty of introducing our honorable orator, Dr. Neerja Bhatla. Dr. Neerja Bhatla is professor and head of Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at India's prestigious All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. She is a born AIIMSite, having completed her graduation and post-graduation at AIIMS and later an advanced course in epidemiology from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, USA. She heads the WHO Collaborating Center for Research in Reproductive Health at AIIMS and the Gynec Oncology Unit at National Cancer Institute, Jhajjar, New Delhi. She has been the national coordinator of Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecological Society of India, that is FOGSI, for breast and cervical cancer screening, where she brought out the first Indian resource-based FOGSI good clinical practice recommendations for screening and management of pre-invasive cervical lesions and HPV vaccination for India's diverse healthcare systems. Dr. Bhatla has been working tirelessly for the last 35 years to eliminate cervical cancer in India by creating awareness, conducting community screening camps, performing gynae-onco surgeries, supporting initiatives to bring low-cost Indian HPV vaccines, and to develop low-cost indigenous HPV tests to promote screening. Dr. Bhatla is an academician par excellence. Her contribution to the development of gynecologic oncology as a super specialty branch in India is immense. It is she who established the MCH Gynae-Onco program at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which is one of the first in India. And she also initiated the nationwide AGOI fellowships. She is the first woman doctor from India to grace as the chairperson of FIGO's Gynae-Oncology Committee, where she led the revision of FIGO staging of cervical cancer. She has more than 30 years of teaching experience at various renowned institutes in India and abroad, including the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, New York. Not only as an academician, but Dr. Bhatla stands tall as an avid researcher too. She is a staunch researcher and has undertaken several research projects resulting in more than 250 publications to her credit. Dr. Bhatla set up HPV testing by hybrid capture technique, one of the earliest in India, and comprehensive HPV genotyping by the reverse line plot assay, in collaboration with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. The data generated from these studies are now quoted by the WHO ICO database on HPV prevalence and can be accessed online. She also conducted trials on low-cost care HPV test. She has spearheaded vaccine trials on all 3 types of prophylactic HPV vaccines, providing evidence for WHO recommendations. She has developed several biomedical devices to promote the training of health workers for screening and treatment of cervical cancer in the remote areas. Dr. Bhatla has brought recognition for our nation on the global map through international collaborations with prestigious academic institutions like the World Health Organization, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, Johns Hopkins University, the University College of London, and many more. She is the member of the WHO Director General's Technical Advisory Group on Cervical Cancer Elimination since 2019 and reviewer for WHO guidelines. Dr. Bhatla has worked with governmental national organizations, including Indian Council of Medical Research, Department of Biotechnology, National Institute of Preventive Health Research, Translational Health Sciences and Technology Institute, and we are also honored to have Dr. Bhatla as the chairperson of our own ICMR NIRRCH Scientific Advisory Committee. Apart from gynae oncology, during the COVID pandemic, Dr. Bhatla has contributed extensively to the guidelines for management of pregnant women and as a member of the NDIE in introducing the COVID vaccine in pregnant and lactating women. She initiated the first COVID obstetric unit in India and published the first case of delivery of a COVID positive pregnant woman in India. Her contributions to maternal health through the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare Department are immense. She is a member of the Task Force for Reduction of Maternal Mortality in India and also for the National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes, Cardiovascular Diseases, and Stroke and Standard Treatment Workflows. Dr. Bhatla has constantly endeavored to improve the health of the disadvantaged women. In recognition of her committed work, she has been honored with innumerable fellowships and awards. She is a recipient of several fellowships like Fellow of the Indian College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, Fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, Fellow of Indian Medical Sciences Academy, and the prestigious Fellow of Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. In 2021, she was awarded Shobha Seth Wenger Distinguished Professor of Gynecologic Oncology at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. She was conferred with the Women's Leadership Conclave Award by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, and the ISCCP Excellence Award 2019 for contributions in the field of cervical cancer prevention. She has been invited for prestigious orations like ICOG Dr. Usha Saraiya Oration 2021 and many, many more. It is indeed our pleasure to have such a luminous stalwart for today's oration. We welcome you, madam, and invite you to deliver the oration for this August gathering. I now invite Dr. Jayashree Joshi, madam, for the citation reading, which will be followed by the oration. Thank you.
Thank you, Anushri. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jayashree Joshi, a very senior gynecologist with a PhD in biochemistry. She has been associated with Kasturba Health Society for several years, and currently she is a professor emeritus there. She is an alumni of our institute, and she took voluntary retirement when she was a deputy director and head of the clinical research division here. She has worked immensely in the field of contraception, RTI, STIs, and also set up a dedicated cytology lab to read the pap smears, where even some of the RTI, STIs could be diagnosed. She has a lot of experience working in tribal and rural areas and continues to offer her expertise to read the pap smear slides during pre-screening camps organized by NGOs working for underprivileged and vulnerable communities. She has a lot of research work with Ayurvedic medicines too in the areas of reproductive health. She has several publications to credit and continues to work as PI for several research projects. Over to you, Dr. Jayashree.
Thank you, Dr. Viman Joshi, for your kind introduction. Namaste and good afternoon. Madam Usha Saraiya, Dr. Neerja Bhatla, Ashok Vaidya sir and Madam Rama Vaidya, who are online, I believe. Senior scientists in headquarters, Dr. Gitanjali Sachudev, Dr. Shobha Udupi, Dr. Ashwini Kumar Rao, Dr. Smita Mahale, Dr. Veena Doshi, Dr. Anushri Patil, Shubhada Agashe, and Professor Devi, family members, and all of you who have joined here physically and online. It's a pleasure to be able to attend this oration physically, at least of myself. I know Dr. Neerja is online. Although my job is just to read the citation, I cannot do it without speaking a few lines about both Dr. Devi and Dr. Neerja. So please permit me to say a little bit, because I think I might be the only person who was actually a student, undergraduate student in Nagpur Medical College. However, those memories are not very strong, because she left within 2 or 3 months after we joined the physical sessions. However, later I was again associated with her at IRR when she came as administrative head in 1975, and it was for a short duration of about 2 years only. Dr. Virkar and her team had been running 4 family welfare clinics over here. I had joined, and actually the cytology that was established by Dr. Virkar, not by me. But I joined as a clinician as well as cytologist, and I did a lot of cytology later on. And IRR was a WHO recognized center. But Professor Devi expanded the base of contraceptive research, and you have heard the extent of the expansion. Medical termination of pregnancy, prostaglandin-based abortions, chemical human sterilization, different types of injectable contraceptives, and many of these were multicentric studies within Mumbai or with other ICMR or WHO centers all over India. She also introduced research in traditional medicine-based contraceptive research, both clinical and experimental at IRR. And actually, my first paper on the VTP tablets, which were being used as contraceptives in Poddar Hospital, was with her. And it was not until we showed that there was total absence of any action that the Poddar Hospital, then they stopped giving the tablets, because they were using it. You started it in postpartum period, and never realized that part of the protection was natural because of lactational amenorrhea. But when we did the study in regularly menstruating women, we found that there was no action at all. And that's why the pregnancy rates were high. She also introduced the informed consent and the ethics committee aspect at this institute. And I saw Charak Sanhita for the first time in my life in the library of IRR during her tenure. Although infertile couples were being helped to some extent in earlier clinics, also, Dr. Devi introduced a full-fledged department of endocrinology and infertility under the expert leadership of Dr. Rama Vaidya. In short, Dr. Devi brought laurels to any institute or organization with which she was associated before she joined IRR or later. I'm equally excited that today Dr. Neerja Bhatla is delivering the oration on this topic, which is very dear to us and to Dr. Usha Saraya, our chief guest. She is a pioneer in this area and has inspired several gynecologists all over, not only India, but all over the world actually. And Dr. Prajakta Paradkar will remember we had met first Dr. Neerja Bhatla in Delhi, and then again we presented one paper on interleukin-6 serum levels, regression with turmeric extract and associated with pap smear regression also. You are all aware of the cervical cancer Bharat. Dr. Priya Ganesh is also contributing to it. And if I may just add, I would like to advocate the expansion of the services, diagnostic services to the Ayurvedic, homeopathy, and Unani hospitals and their clinics. And the other thing is regarding, it is possible because at Sayan Ayurved, we have been doing routine cervical cancer screening for more than 20 years now, for all women above the age of 30 years. And it is possible to include all of that. Now, coming to Dr. Neerja, she has a lion's share in some areas of HPV diagnostics and HPV vaccination. And I don't want to repeat many things, that's why I'm just going to do it fast. I think I will end this. Recently I had the occasion to listen to her talk on genetics and epigenetic changes and how to use them for the diagnosis, for the treatment, and even prevention of not only endometrial but even ovarian cancer. And it was a wonderful talk. And I know Dr. Ramavendra also has been a proponent of preventive therapy for endometrial cancer with progestogen for quite a few decades now. And I mean, it applies to all of us. There is technology that is available. There are medicines that are available. And there is the general population which needs it so much. And it requires an able person to use these developments and medicines and the techniques for the to research on it and to use it for the benefit of the needy. So I would like to end by summarizing Dr. Neerja Bhatla with a Sanskrit shlok. Amantram aksharam nasti, nasti moolam anaushadam, ayogyaho purusho nasti, yojakas tatra durlabha. So she has been very effective in utilizing technology, gynecological knowledge, and her expertise and her administrative abilities in the larger good of the country. Now I will read the citation. So this is presented ICMR, National Institute for Research in Reproductive and Child Health, Mumbai, and Kasturba Health Society Medical Research Center, Mumbai. To Professor Dr. Neerja Bhatla, Professor and Head, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. In appreciation of her path-breaking achievements in initiatives to bring low-cost Indian HPV vaccine and low-cost indigenous HPV tests. The first woman doctor from India to raise as chairperson PIVO Gynecological Oncological Committee. Bringing out first Indian resource-based Xxxi good clinical practice recommendations for pre-invasive cervical lesions and HPV vaccination for Indian healthcare systems. Developing biomedical devices for screening and treatment of cervical cancer in remote areas. Leading the AODN Society to address gynecological infections and neoplasia. Expert oncological services for cervical, vulvar, endometrial, and ovarian cancers. And spreading nationwide awareness along with the AOGYN team that cervical cancer is preventable. Signed by Dr. Gitanjali Sachdev, Dr. Rama Vaidya, and Dr. Ashok Vaidya, dated 1st November 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Xxxi Prof. Floor is yours, madam. Dr. Bhatla, you can share screen.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You can be a little loudly.
Can you hear me? Do
Yes.
you hear me? Is it clear?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, I will just share my screen. Can you see my screen now? Actually, you can, I know, because I see it there, right? So I hope everybody can see my screen. At the outset, I would like to say how I am truly humbled, honored, overwhelmed to be selected for this Dr. P.K. Devi oration, the 31st oration today. And I thank all the committee members for this oration, as well as all the leaders at NIRRCH, Dr. Gitanjali Sachdeva, Dr. Smita Mehle, the past director, and other luminaries, Dr. Jayashree Joshi, Dr. Veena Joshi, Dr. Anushri, and I admire always Dr. Usha Saraya, and I am so grateful that she is the chief guest today because she has rendered enormous services in the country. And I don't think anyone can match up to the amount of work she has done to ensure training and dissemination of the message. Today, I will be speaking about HPV vaccination for cervical cancer elimination, current status, and scope of implementation. So thank you all out there who have joined today for this hearing my talk here today. So I think all of us who are gathered here today have an interest in cervical cancer elimination, and it is not new to anyone that we have an emerging global strategy, which was launched 2 years back on the 17th of November. And we have very clear targets that have been defined that countries should try to achieve these targets by 2030, to have 90% of girls vaccinated with HPV vaccine by 15 years, 70% of women screened with an HPV test by 35 and 45 years twice, and 90% of women identified with any kind of cervical disease should receive treatment for precancerous lesions or invasive cancer. It is hoped that once these targets have been set in place by 2030, we will be on the road to elimination. Elimination being defined as less than 4 cases of cervical cancer per 100,000 women years. So it will not be gone, but it will not be a public health problem. It will be in the realm of a rare cancer, as we say, when they are less than 6. It is also hoped that once this happens, we would be close to the SDG goal of 30% reduction in mortality from cervical cancer. So now the question is turning this promise into a reality. The promise being freedom from cervical cancer. Tools are there for creating awareness, screening, vaccination. The goal is clear that we want to have healthy mothers, healthy girls, healthy health. But the problem is that though we have these ingredients, we have these tools, we have guidelines like recipe books, it's not translating into a delectable dish. We have the HPV testing since 2005. It is known, and IARC has said that primary screening by HPV will reduce it. We have found that we can do VI and BILI with comparable sensitivity to pap smear, where these facilities are not there. Many newer devices have been developed which can go to the doorstep and the last mile facilities. We now have more and more HPV vaccines coming and being pre-qualified. And we have our own guidelines from FOGSI, from the ministry, but we have not reached the numbers we should. And the Globocan 2020 database from the WHO suggests that we still remain in the second highest bracket. In fact, if you look at the total numbers, Worldwide, they have increased. In the blue here, you have the incidence. In the red, you have the mortality and the persisting inequities. And you can see that the countries with the lowest development indices continue to have the highest rates of cervical cancer. You also see that the ones with the higher have them in the earlier ages. And this is mainly a reflection of the late stages at which they are diagnosed in the disadvantaged countries. Being a slow growing cancer pushes the age at diagnosis because of the increasing stage. So this is what we have from Globocan 2020, a total of 604,000 estimated cases, with India and China being in the forefront. In terms of deaths as well, 340,000 worldwide, and again led by India and China. And if you look at the scenario in India, just the breast and the cervical cancer, and the third, the lip oral cavity, which are also part of the common cancer screening strategy of the ministry, actually lessen the burden in women by half if we can manage to control them. Recently, more data has been published from the National Cancer Registry Program, which has reviewed its data from 2012 to 16. This covers 28 population-based registries from different regions and zones, and a wide variation of women's cancers, the highest proportion in Western and Southern India, and overall the Northeast region with the lowest proportion, breast cancer leading in 11 of these registries. If we look by the registry individually, we can see that the highest incidences are in rural areas like Barshi, Osmanabad and Bid, Mizoram, Tripura, Pasighat, Kachar, and Nagaland. The rates in general are higher in the northeastern part of the country, which you see in blue, and the highest is 27.7 per 100,000 in the Papumpare district of Arunachal Pradesh. Overall, there has been a decline in the trends of cervical cancer. Here you can see the trend from 1982 to 2016, and it is seen and it was seen in most of the registries, with the maximum decline in the PVCR of Chennai, a 3.54 annual % change. This has been led to give people a sense of reassurance that the cancer is declining without any active interference. Do we really need to put anything into it? And the answer actually is yes, because if you see, though it is declining, it is still well above the cutoff of 4 per 100,000, which is envisaged. In fact, if you go by epidemiological belief, this is the best time to strike to get elimination. And here this data also showed that 60% of the women are presenting with loco-regional spread already, and the same unfortunately is true for breast cancer as well. Now, the WHO life course approach to cervical cancer control is not new. They have been recommending primary prevention for girls aged 9 to 14 years with HPV vaccination for a long time, primordial prevention by various awareness measures, and the secondary and tertiary prevention also. But in May 2018, when the WHO Director General made his call to eliminate cervical cancer, it was really the first evidence of political will in this direction. And it was actually a good thing that this happened before the pandemic came. And it was quite amazing that WHO, despite their preoccupation now with the pandemic, was able to sustain momentum for cervical cancer elimination as well. In fact, that year we had the FIGO side event alongside WHO's Elimination of Cervical Cancer Initiative launch. And we called it Heralding a New Era for Cervical Cancer Control. This was at the time when I was the FIGO chairperson for gynae oncology. You can see here Dr. C.N. Purandre. Sia Grenman was our vice president ex officio with Dr. Tedros, and Dr. Ann Kihara, who is our president-elect, Carlos, the past president. So we have a lot of people who came together that day in Geneva to promote FIGO's commitment. And Dr. Purandare made this very important statement. Too often, women who are now being saved by the reduction in maternal mortality, because we know that by various methods, political effort, even monetary incentives and monetary, not necessarily even incentives, but at least bearing of costs, we find that there are fewer women now dying from maternal mortality than from cervical cancer, which is a preventable disease. And he said, we are just going to save women from maternal mortality only to have them die later from cervical cancer, which is a tragedy. So subsequently, 2020, there was this major launch event where worldwide people committed for it. Monuments were lit up in teal. This is the Howrah Bridge, which was lit up to mark the launch, and many monuments, others also in the country and worldwide, got this sort of marked the day. Now, coming to the types of HPV vaccines and HPV epidemiology in India, cervical cancer is one of the few cancers that is caused by a virus. The other ones we commonly know of is the hepatitis B, which has been used quite effectively. So now this is the one of the few that can be prevented by a vaccine, and the first generation bivalent and quadrivalent were targeted against type 16 and 18, which cause at least 70% of cervical cancer, or I should say an average of 70% worldwide, being less or more in some regions. But very interestingly, in India, we find that about 84% of cervical cancer is caused by HPV 16 and 18. And this is a very, very heartening fact, because it indicates that just having these two types in our vaccines would lead to equal or more efficiency than has been shown in studies and in worldwide experience worldwide. In fact, the first studies by Dr. B.C. Das had suggested that there was a high prevalence of 16. But even subsequent studies from our center, from Cancer Institute and many other places, Vellore, etc., substantiated this fact, and this is what was put together by the WHO ICO. So we accept then that primary prevention by HPV vaccination of young girls and boys can be a game changer in the battle against cervical cancer. So what are the limitations? You can put it down broadly to awareness, affordability, and availability. So these are the first two vaccines that we had, Gardasil and Cervarix, which had, the one had 611 for benign disease as well. And they had the initial immunization of 3 doses each. And there was adequate information, including from these kind of systematic review and meta-analysis of the efficacy and safety, and the endpoints being looked at in those initial studies were really CIN2+. This also caused reservation in the minds of some people whether this was good enough to show that cervical cancer would be prevented if CIN2+ was all that was shown. But there were others who were ready to argue that if screening can work to prevent cancer because we detect and treat the CIN2+ lesions, HPV vaccines doing the same should do so as well. Today we have 4 WHO pre-qualified vaccines. In addition to Cervarix and Gardasil, we also have now Gardasil 9, which is a nonavalent vaccine, where 5 more high-risk types, the commonest worldwide, have been added on. And we have a bivalent vaccine from China, which has also received WHO pre-qualification. So they have some variations in terms of their dosages, their substrate, the adjuvant, but broadly the same types. Now, the injection schedule of 2 doses has been accepted for all these for girls under the age of 15 years who are otherwise immunocompetent. But the excitement now is about Cervavac. The first Indian HPV vaccine being produced by the Serum Institute of India. It's a quadrivalent vaccine with the two high-risk 16-18 and 6-11. And presently, the two-dose schedule has been licensed for the young girls. This is actually a slight bit of error. 2 doses for the young girls and 3 doses for the ones who are older. It is licensed for the ages 9 to 26 years. So this is the first one indigenously developed and manufactured. It's an intramuscular injection. Again, it has the same virus-like particles of the L1 proteins. It's taken almost 10 years in R&D, animal studies, clinical trials before being licensed in July 2022. And NTAGI has also reviewed the data and recommended that it can be introduced in the National Immunization Schedule for the girls 9 to 14 years of age. So these are the vaccines we have available in India, therefore: Gardasil, Cervarix, Gardasil 9, and Cervavac. Just to briefly run you through the study which they have done, which has been a multi-center study, and we have also been part of that from AIIMS. There were 2 age cohorts: age 9 to 14 years, the 2 dose; age 15 to 26 years, the 3 dose. And the Gardasil was used as active comparator, and immunogenicity and safety were assessed. Over the years, the endpoint, or I should say the diagnostic criteria of efficiency and immunogenicity have been changing. And while we started from showing the efficacy in terms of prevention of CIN2+, it changed to efficacy in terms of showing prevention of persistent infection, because it was recognized that that is an essential precursor to getting CIN2+. 90% of women would clear the infection. It's only the ones who persisted who would be at risk. So it changed to persistent infection as being diagnostic. And immunogenicity comparisons are supposed to be allowed to extrapolate the efficacy data to newer vaccines. So in these two age cohorts, there were 3 arms in each: the male, the female getting Serum Institute vaccine, and only the female for Gardasil as the comparator, because Gardasil 4 is not licensed for males in India. Now the Gardasil 9 has been licensed. So then these were compared for immunogenic non-inferiority 1 month after the last dose at 7 months. And Cervavac did demonstrate robust antibody response, 100% seroconversion across all 4 vaccine types, with a geometric mean fold rise for all 4 types more than 1,000-fold across all age cohorts and genders. The adverse events were mostly mild or moderate, non-serious, recovered completely. There was no vaccine-related serious adverse event or solicited reactogenicity with the severity of grade 3 or more. And the overall incidence was well within the acceptable limits and in line with the product label of the comparator, that is Gardasil. So coming to the HPV vaccine dose schedules and the real-world efficacy data. What has happened again in the recent past this year is that SAGE has recommended updating dose schedules for HPV as follows. 1 or 2 dose schedule can be chosen by countries for the primary target of girls aged 9 to 14 years. 1 or 2 dose schedule can also be selected for young women aged 15 to 20 years. And for women older than 21 years, 2 doses with a 6-month interval. In short, by the latest SAGE recommendations, there is no more 3 doses for any age group. Immunocompromised individuals, including those with HIV, however, should receive 3 doses if feasible, and if not, at least 2 doses, even the younger ones. And there is limited evidence regarding the efficacy of a single dose in this group. Now, while this is a firm recommendation from SAGE, which came out in April this year, but it is yet to have the endorsement of the WHO position paper, which is expected soon. And thereafter, it is expected that the guidelines from various associations, societies, ministries, etc., will follow for this. And I'm happy to say that much of the information that has informed WHO and SAGE in the past few years has been from our trial of 2 versus 3 doses of HPV vaccination in India. Many of you have already seen this as we have been going forth. We started this in 2009, and there were a number of centers which are involved and continue to be involved in the follow-up of these. It was a very extraordinary trial in many respects. It was very ambitious. 20,000 girls to be recruited aged 10 to 18 years, 10,000 girls getting 3 doses over 6 months, 10,000 getting 2 doses 6 months apart. Do remember, this was the year 2009. It took almost 3 years actually before that to prepare the trial, to get the vaccines donated by Merck, etc. Now the plan was to follow them up for 20 years to look at seroconversion, immune response, HPV infection rates, incidence of CIN, incidence of cervical cancer, etc. We're sitting here in the August gathering of ICMR, and I have to say that when we sent it for our approvals, ICMR, even one of the reviewers even asked, do the investigators think they are immortal? And we said, no, we expect that there will be at least 2 or 3 generations of researchers who will take this project forward. And that's exactly how it is happening, right from the high command at IARC, where Dr. Shankar Narayan was the one who started it, and now being ably followed up by Dr. Partha Basu. So, as you know, we had this immense problem that suddenly we were asked to stop vaccinating girls because of problems in another HPV trial. And we found ourselves left with a very serendipitously designed new observational study where people had received almost equal doses. Girls had received of 1 dose, of 2 doses at 2-month interval from the 3-dose cohort, of 2 doses at 6-month interval from the 2-dose cohort, and 3 doses as planned at 0, 2, and 6 months. Fortunately, Gates Foundation decided that they were ready to continue supporting the follow-up. Fortunately, the investigators did not crack up and decided to pivot and continued following these. Of course, you know that this is now history, that 2 and 3 dose curves were completely superimposed. And this data was shared long back by WHO when they agreed to switch that, among other some studies. The 1 dose also, this was 2 dose, at 2 months apart, which was about a 10th of the level by the 6-month interval. And the 1 dose also continued to mount and maintain some level of dose. And do remember that even today, we do not know for HPV vaccine the immune correlate of protection, which is a constant figure for every vaccine. And yet we have to know what is the one for HPV vaccine. So likely a very small number, and likely this is already a lot. So I already told you about the 4 groups that we had. We then recruited subsequently unvaccinated cohorts who were age and site matched from the areas that we were working in, and a second group subsequently as well. And we continued to do the yearly follow-up of the cervical specimen collection once these girls got married. And we continued to screen for cervical cancer once they reached the age of 25 and 30 years, both the cohorts which were vaccinated and these unvaccinated cohorts. Now, when we look back at the vaccine efficacy at 10 years after 1, 2, and 3 doses, we find that we have a robust response for persistent infections, which is pretty similar in all the cohorts. And if we look at the vaccine efficacy for incident HPV infection, about 2/3 of them are being prevented by any dose. And if we look at it for persistent HPV infection, 16 and 18, I'm talking about 16 and 18 only, which are the vaccine contains types. Again, we find that we have a very good response, and the confidence intervals are quite reasonable too. So this is still work in progress. We're still continuing to follow these girls, but this is the kind of very exciting information which has been used by various people, and I will tell you. In fact, there was a single case of CIN3 detected with the single dose recipient who was found to be negative for HPV 16 and 18. Again, we also looked at the older age group because our cohort was 10 to 18 years, and we did not see any significant difference based on age. And this and other data from other studies has again informed the SAGE decision to continue allowing 2 doses up to the age of 20 years. The only risk being that they may become sexually active before that. So adequate information was there right from these first trials, which were already very elaborate, who had looked at level 1 evidence for safety and efficacy for preventing cervical, vulvar, and vaginal, pre-invasive and invasive lesions. And yet, there was always that element of saying, where have you proved that cervical cancer is less? So we cannot have a randomized trial that waits for proving cervical cancer. Same as you cannot have a randomized trial to prove that it's safe to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. So the only information that has to come is from very good quality observational data. And the first one that came was from Sweden, where they compared a very large number, 1.67 million girls and women 10 to 30 years of age with no previous vaccination in this study population from 2006 to 2017, and they looked at what happened to these. And they found that there was a substantial reduction in these women who had been vaccinated, and it was most for those who had been vaccinated at less than 17 years of age, followed by the ones who were 17 to 30 years of age, compared with the unvaccinated women. And this, of course, had some limitations because they have not really looked for their screening status and all, but it is a very good information. I will also share with you what has happened in UK, where a national program was started in 2008 with a 3-dose vaccination at the time of girls aged 12 to 13 with catch-up up to 18 years. And Cervarix was used from 2008 to 2012. Then they moved to Gardasil because there was a feeling that they have enough warts and they should be looking at that. In 2014, following the change in recommendations, they moved it to a 2-dose course for girls up to and including the age of 14 years that is not had yet their 15th birthday. And they called in 2020 again for evidence of the efficacy of single-dose vaccine, and the Joint Commission for Vaccine and Immunizations has now decided to consider the 1-dose HPV immunization program. Of course, you must remember that in a situation where they have already managed to reduce a large number of the HPV infections, going into such a community with a 1-dose will have different implications as compared to starting out with a 1-dose program altogether. But there is adequate evidence of herd immunity from the very early studies in Australia and subsequently in many observational data coming from the US, etc., as well, to show that a herd immunity is going to amplify the results if there is adequate coverage. We are very happy to also say that the IARC India trial was one of the main ones which was involved in the consideration by the JCVI amongst the other evidence that they considered, which included the Costa Rica vaccine trial, the delayed booster study, the Kenshi trial, and the DORIS study, which is dose reduction, immunobridging, and safety, and a systematic review of all these observational studies. Because following upon our study and the data that we were able to show, there was naturally a requirement to now start randomized trials on a 1-dose. This would never have happened if it had not been for this serendipitous situation where we were left with a large 1-dose group. Because at that time, no vaccinologists accepted that 1 dose could be sufficient for a vaccine of this type. And that events have proved otherwise. So the randomized trials were started to prove this point, and many of them are likely to mature with their final data in the next year or definitely by 2024. But already there is quite a bit of data forthcoming from Kenshi, from Doris, and they are using even the non-availent vaccine to see. And these are highly supportive that the one dose does work. However, the one dose, the requirement by WHO is to show that the antibodies will persist till 2 years duration. And therefore, for newer vaccines like Cervivac, if they have not yet done the trial accordingly, they cannot yet be given that one dose license. But coming back to UK, by 10 years after the introduction of HPV vaccination, there have been substantial reductions in the HPV 16, 18, and also the related types 31, 33, 45 in the women undergoing 16 to 24 years who came for the chlamydia screening program, they found. And similar had been reported from Australia, where other sexually transmitted infections had not decreased, but the HPV infections had decreased amongst the vaccinated, as well as amongst others as well, in suggesting the herd immunity. So now the point was that while there was adequate infection evidence for CIN, again, the effect on cervical cancer being not so good. So this register-based observational study looked into the effects of the program with the problems of observational studies notwithstanding. And this was the period in which the bivalent vaccine had been used. And there were 3 vaccinated cohorts who were used to account for differences in the school year in which the vaccine was offered. So you had the age 12 to 13, the age 14 to 16, the age 16 to 18, and 4 unvaccinated cohorts included as well based on date of birth and divided so as to distinguish between groups of women who have been offered cervical screening from different ages. And then this was calculated based upon the Poisson model. The estimation of the number of cancers in CIN3 was done by comparing the expected number of events in the vaccinated cohort with the corresponding expected numbers when the cohort effects were forced to be the same as in the last unvaccinated cohort. And they had 3 models. One had all main effects for age and cohort, age by cohort interactions, linear trend, dummy variables for Jane-Goody effect, seasonal effects. Model 2 was this one with adjustment for under-registration. Model 3 was the first one with adjustment for the awareness campaign. And this was the way it was looking, but I will take you to the next one to show you that during the study period, there was a large number of 27,000 diagnoses of cervical cancer and 318 plus of CIN3. It included a humongous 13.7 million years of follow-up of women aged 20 years to less than 30 years in the 3 vaccinated cohorts. And you can see that there is a remarkable trend to decreasing in the years when the vaccinated cohort starts to be screened. So this is the type of effect we are seeing, though it came actually in all the models, but I'm just showing you the one that you can see that there is an overall difference which is highly significant between all the vaccinated cohorts as compared to the unvaccinated, which is given the rank of 1. And these are the corresponding graphs which show you how the declines are to be invested. So it was faster and better than it was expected. In fact, in such a short time, it was estimated that there had been 448 fewer cervical cancers and 17,000 fewer cases of CIN3 in vaccinated cohorts than would have been expected without the vaccination. And the relative reduction in the CA cervix rates varied by the age at which they had got it. For those aged 16 to 18 years, 34%, 14 to 16 years, 62%, and aged 12 to 13 years, 87%. Corresponding reductions for CIN3, 39%, 75%, and 97% in the youngest age groups. And these results remain similar across models. So coming to the current status and scope of implementation. While there are 130 countries and regions that have actually implemented it, but if you look at the size of contribution of disease it is not good enough because the burden of cervical cancer rests in countries like India and China largely, which have not introduced a national policy. There are many countries and territories with gender-neutral HPV vaccination who are vaccinating the boys as well. But vaccination of boys, WHO has been recommending since 2019 to please defer introduction until there is enough vaccine availability for girls, because paradoxically, there is a shortage of HPV vaccine worldwide, even though we are saying that there are people who cannot afford it. So coming to the most important part, where are we in India? I already spoke about awareness, affordability, availability. I will put affordability first here because this is critical. If you don't have the money in your pocket, you cannot even think of buying it. And even at Gavi price that was being offered, the HPV vaccine would cost more than all the other childhood vaccines put together. Now the availability of an indigenous vaccine promises to solve this problem. Availability is still the critical aspect. How soon will they be able to stockpile? How soon will they be able to create the supply chain? This is largely going to determine the plan and pace of action. Awareness is already improving, but you can't really give it the main thrust until the product is in the program, because it would be unethical to tell people that they can take a vaccine if you're not going to give it to them. But certainly amongst those who can afford, there is ample data now and no reason for anyone to be concerned about taking the vaccine. So those who can afford the existing vaccines should take them without any delay. So now when we go into vaccination, what are the main questions? We have to decide what age, the vaccine schedules, and the number of age cohorts that we will be able to vaccinate. Routine vaccination at 9 to 14 years with the current strategy, or an extended 2 dose. That is also talked about, where you can give 1 dose and delay the second dose, because usually that may not make too much difference, but you will know by then whether a single is working. But depends again on the license. Right now our license is 2 dose. Multi-age cohort vaccination up to 14, 18 or 25 years old obviously needs more vaccination, serves as a catch-up. Should we go there? Should we give it to girls only, or should we give it to the boys and girls? And the number of doses, are we going to give 1 or 2? And what about other special groups? Older females and males at different ages, people living with HIV, immunosuppressed individuals, men who have sex with men. And are we to give it as a routine vaccination or as a campaign mode? So presently what the government is thinking about is to do it as a vaccination for the 9 to 14 years, to do it for the girls only, to use 2 doses to start with, and to give it as a campaign mode perhaps, because that will be faster. But elimination will require a very high vaccination cover of 90%, and definitely including these other groups is eventually going to accelerate elimination. So availability and affordability are the critical issues. Data on single dose is not yet ready. The trials are yet to in fact start. The total cohort of the 9 to 14 years old is about 6.8 crore girls. So it can be done in phases depending on the availability. One thought is to do it in about 3 phases, but this will largely depend upon the availability that is promised by the company. And whom do you then target first? Do you give it first to the ones which have the highest burden of cancer? Or another thought that is coming is, should we give it first to the ones where there is the better governance? They should read actually better governance, because if we give it to the better governance with the 2 doses, and then the poorer governance we take later on, and then by then we may have data on 1 dose vaccine, and that might suffice in those where there's already problems in distributing. So I'm going to take you through some models from Mark Brisson, Rolet, Karen Canfield. They have come out with some excellent modeling, which has largely informed the efforts of the WHO guideline development group, even for screening and even the thinking about vaccination. Here you can see their modeling for 4 countries based on the routine at 9 years and the routine at a 5-year extended interval, where there is practically no difference in that with their no max. And with the max, you can see the multiple age cohorts, whether it is given 9 to 14 years, 9 to 18, and 9 to 25 years. And you do see that it does advance the rate at which you will reach this level. You know, it is here, it is going down till 4, till 5 till 4, till 14, till 11. A lot depends on where you're starting, what is the number you are starting at. So you will find that it can go down a little faster and advance it if you cover more girls, but it is the question of balancing off. So this is 9 to 14 years, which is our plan to give all the girls from 9 to 14 years 80% coverage. And that sounds good because compared to only 9 years, we are going to get a good enough result out of that. And this is when you do the 9 to 18 years, where you see that there is a little bit more, obviously, but then it does require substantially more doses and small additional gains. So perhaps this is not the right way for us to go. Similarly, what about gender neutral vaccination? Well, eventually it will definitely show a difference, but in the short term, not. So certainly at the time when you are just starting and struggling with availability, gender neutral vaccination is not going to give you a lot of benefit in the long term. This is what is the expectation? Girls only vaccination, 89.4% reduction, adding twice in lifetime screening, 96.7%. This is Mark Brisson's estimation of a comparative modeling in 78 low income and lower middle income countries. And you can see that as the years are going by here, and by about 2060, you see that India goes to the dark blue, which suggests that you are now in the less than 4 per 100,000, and eventually everybody gets there following this vaccination and 2 lifetime screens, which is indeed encouraging. So to conclude, I will say that universal HPV vaccination implementation has been impacted by cost and availability. The availability of an Indian vaccine is an exciting development that will improve affordability and accessibility. There is a higher proportion of HPV 16-18 in India, which is suitable for first generation vaccines to show benefit. One dose vaccination will be a further game changer, reduce costs, improve coverage, and facilitate logistics. So I would like to add my acknowledgements to all my wonderful team members who have worked with us over the years, from gynecology, from virology, lab oncology, pathology, our field staff and social workers, our data managers and biostatisticians, IR, and all the collaborators you see here at one of the meetings, annual meetings of all our project staff. This is Dr. Zurhausen on one of his visits to India, and BMGF, who continue to support us. And I would definitely like to thank my department, all the previous heads of department who you can see behind me in the photographs up here, who have always extended support and cooperation for the work that we do. Paul Coelho said, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. This is a picture of our new block where we have recently relocated, the mother and child block, and I would invite you all to visit us whenever you are in Delhi. So with that, I thank you for a very patient hearing and for this opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatla, for that lucid presentation. I think it was very much encouraging to see the progress made in terms of HPV vaccination being available in the country. With the indigenous vaccine, we have a lot to hope, and also a lot of government efforts to take this ahead and achieve the 2030 target. I think we all should join together again for a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of Professor P.K. Devi Oration Committee, I request Dr. Ravleen Bakshi, who is our representative there from XCMR headquarters, to hand over the Oration Award to Dr. Neerja Bhatla. Also, the citation Dr. Ravleen. So this is the Oration Award. Thank you, Dr. Ravleen. Thank you, Dr. Neerja Bhatla. Before we ask Dr. Shubhada Agashe to propose vote of thanks, I would like to make a small announcement. NIRH is hosting an international conference, and I wanted to take this opportunity to let all the audiences know so that we see you in large numbers. So this is International Conference on Kaleidoscopic Insights into Reproductive and Child Health. It is our former director's centenary year, Dr. Shantarao centenary celebration. So the event will be from 23rd to 25th January 2023, and we have invited abstract submission until December 11th this year. There is also a CME on genetic testing and counseling in medical practice on the first day, in the first session, which will be coordinated by Dr. Shailesh Pandey from our institute. So we invite you all to this conference and look forward to meeting you soon in person. Thank you.
Next year.
Next year. I now invite Shubhada Agashe to propose vote of thanks. He's Assistant Director from Kasturba Health Society, Medical Research Center, Mumbai.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. Good afternoon, everyone. Dignitaries which are present in the auditorium, dignitaries online, hello to all. On the occasion of the 31st Professor P.K. Devi Memorial Oration, it's my pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to all of you. At the onset, I wish to thank all the Corona warriors. It may sound a bit out of place, but after 2 years, it's an occasion when we are sitting together and celebrating this August gathering. So thank you to all those who contributed to tide over the COVID-19 pandemic. We wish to extend on behalf of NIRH, NIRCH, and KHSMRC, we wish to extend our sincere thanks to Professor Neerja Bhatla for extensive oration. Ma'am, you have taken us through the journey of HPV virus vaccination. Thank you so much. It was most enlightening oration. Thank you very much for spreading a nationwide awareness that cervical cancer is preventable. We thank Dr. Usha Saraiya, Madam, for a gracious being present here with us. Thank you very much. As you said in your presidential address, that great people never pass away. They remain in our memories. In all our presentations we have met, we are introduced to Dr. Professor P.K. Devi. And as you said, like research institutes and researchers are wealth to the nation. We are grateful to you for putting us in the list of wealth to the nation. Thank you very much. I will thank a student who promised her teacher that she will never let her down. And Ramanan, it's a journey of 31 long years in her memory of your great teacher. Thank you very much, Dr. Rama Vaidya, Secretary IC of our own institute, Kasturba Society Medical Research Center. Thank you, ma'am. We extend our gratitude and thanks to Dr. Ashok Vaidya, Professor Emeritus of Kasturba Society Medical Research Center, our mentor and great support for this endeavor year on year. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Today we couldn't see her, but I'm sure he's there. Our sincere thanks to Dr. Xxxi Prof, Professor Emeritus of HSMRC, being a driving force behind us. We thank Dr. Gitanjali Sachdeva, Director in NIRCH, sorry, for all the support, madam, you have extended to us. We thank our research director, Dr. Shobha OBP, for all her support. We thank Dr. Smita Mahale, ex-director in IRCH, Dr. Beena Doshi, and Dr. Roshni Patil for taking this battle, taking this torch ahead. The oration is continued, as Beena said, post 2018, they have taken the primary lead in organizing this orations. We thank Bharti Kulkarni, Scientist G, Ravina Bakshi, Scientist T, they have handed over the plaque and the oration at Delhi. We thank Mr. Shankar, Mr. Kohli, Mr. Sushant, Dr. Prabhaji, or Mr. Vaibhav. Personally, I not introduced to all this group, but Mr. Lobo, Mr. Praveen, they have helped us arranging all this function so nicely. I cannot forget my colleagues who are sitting down there. They have helped me reaching to all our collaborators and associates. And I hope they are all with us online on the YouTube. And at the end, all the guests and invitees who have raised this occasion, thank you very much. Thank you, Shubha. We end today's session, and I would request all of you to stand up for the national anthem. Mata ki jai. Thank you. Thank you, and you're all welcome for some refreshments outside. Sorry, Dr. Bhatla.
No,
I'd love to have you here.
First we can
When this was December. Yeah.
we are also serving everyone. Thank you.
Can we, Meena, can we meet Dr. Neerja? Hi, Dr. Neerja, it was excellent.
Hi, Dr. Rama. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was nice meeting